Good evening, students. Next up is lab for TAC 15, password modifier. In this lab, um, it's asking you user created passwords are simple and easy to guess. So write a program that simply essentially hashes the thing. All right. Stronger by replacing characters. Use the key below by appending the Q star S to the end of the input. So you'll have to change characters, so they give you a list here, and then you'll have to add Q and S to the end of your password. And if you were to unhash this, you would in reverse, change these back to the originals, have a quick script that does that and removes the end of that, and you display the user password. So you're hashing in something more secure, and then you'd have a script that would unhash uh, to put that password in. All right, so if the input is my password, then the output is my password, as it describes. So each single lines, down here, they're giving you user word input. All right, so the user is putting input in, whatever the password is, my password, like they show you in the example. So now you have a second variable here, and this is where you're going to essentially use an operator that's going to let you essentially add and assign the result to that new variable, right? So you would use a quick operator that would change that and then store that new variable in your password variable. So your first one would be the input, user please enter password. He puts it there. Your hash script is going to then hash that over to what the new password would be and execute on that and store that more secure. So that would come into play uh, cybersecurity purposes, right? If somebody just downloaded a set of passwords that were all hashed, it would be harder to crack, right? So uh, that's where you see it most often. So let's get into what you do next and why. All right. Actually, the first thing I'm going to need to do is establish a variable that I can at least count through that initial one because we have to, let's say count, we have to add on to the initial one, right? So it's going to be just like your typical loops you've been working with. So we set a loop variable to go through it, and again index that to 0, right? You'll always see that pretty common with loops. So first up, you're gonna want to do is pretty much len this. Len you pulled from the last. I think it was around module 2, which is going to return you essentially len will read through the characters and return you uh, an output of how many characters, right? In this example, you're specifically using this to go through all the characters and then look through those characters and replace and add on to the end of it. Again, we're going to append. So then we'll take that first one and then allow you to run your loop through your if else, right? Your conditional, hey, what's going on, your branches, check everything, uh, and then append to the end of the original variable. All right, so let's get this established. All right, so we're running a while loop, right? And while this is true, run this. If the user did not input something true, then it won't execute. So we would run a while loop uh, on what we just established, right? All right, we're running a while loop through the len, 0 to whatever they input on their input. That's what we request from the interpreter. So it's going to take that, start at 0, run through whatever characters they put in. Uh, so now is our conditional branches, our operation that we're really looking at. So we've set up the loop to begin. The first we set was 0. And again, we're going to run through it with a len. So 0, len, to what the user puts in. And again, well establishes is your first syntax for establishing a while loop. While this is true, do this. What are we checking for true? If I becomes I or I becomes exclamation. All right, so if our interpreter says, hey, if when I look at the user input and then any of the characters, right? If user input in this situation is the word, and we're going to say, hey, are any of the characters through 0? And if you know, it says something on the first character is through 0 and 100, check only. But we're not doing that, right? We're checking the whole damn thing, so it's set to 0. Well, and I wouldn't have done it there. I would have done it if I wanted to set a limit of how much to check. There it is. I'm going to have to search my keyboard. So again, I've showed you this previously in other labs. That would be how I would set it to start at 0 and then go through and stop at 100. So if somebody input 1,000, I would only go through the first 100 characters for checking to see what I'm about to do, right? But in this situation, we're taking every character and we're checking it. All right, so let me, so need to check to see if, because we're going to be changing, something is true. So in this situation, we're going to check to see if I becomes, so we're going to check to see if I, so true, if word character equals, and in this situation, it's going to be an I, and you're going to have to execute your if. So again, you're showing that this is going to be part of the if. Your next one, and for this one, because it is part of the if, right? That's why we just added that at the end of it. To execute as part of it, you know, it's not an individual. And you see how it properly spaces itself out to execute as if it was part of that if conditional branch, all is one road. All right, we're going back to that operator I first talked about, right? So if you do not recall, your plus and equal sign essentially lets you assign the result to a new variable, right? So that's all that operator is doing. Our operator up here checked for true, and it's saying, hey, it's true, so we're going to assign the next one as the variable that would be stored in password, they set password. All right.